And welcome in to the Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Kane Schwartz, and I'm joined by Mr. Jaden Kozak over in Maryland. I always say you guys are coming from different places, but I'm really the only one coming from a different place because I'm in a different state. But that is it's not the concern of the matter today. We are here to talk about some week 4 football. As far as our teams went, I mean, I can't be disappointed at all with what happened on Sunday. We had some debate, some healthy debate prior to the podcast about whether or not Ron Rivera should have gone for it, headed into or about to go into overtime. He could have scored, went for two, possibly won the game. There was some debate about that. I'm not upset because I didn't expect to be in that game at all. Your Steelers lost this week. Real quick, what are some takeaways from that, man?
Yeah, I mean, unlike you, I can be disappointed with the result of this past week. It was a little upsetting to see how poor the team played. Thought the offensive line matchup, they're the trenches matchup with their offensive line banged up. Our defensive line has been wrecking offensive lines for the last 3 weeks. We saw none of that on Sunday. Offense looked just as putrid as usual. Kind of feels like maybe after this week, if the offense is as bad as it was last week, and it has been so far this season. We head into the bye in week 6. I think that there's a chance that Matt Canada does end up maybe getting out of there. We'd have 2 weeks to get everything back together, but also Kenny Pickett goes down in this game. They said he's probably not going to miss too much time. I think that there's a pretty solid chance that it is Trubisky against Baltimore on Sunday, and then we go into the bye. So then Pickett has 3 whole weeks to get rested up. But he avoided anything serious because at first, see a guy go down grabbing his knee. You think ACL, something bad. And I think it just ended up being a strain of an MCL or something like that. So, but otherwise, pretty disappointing. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to kind of hit takeaways today as opposed to reviewing every game. So we've got 6 takeaways, 3 from each of us, spanning across a couple different games. So excited to get into that.
Yeah, a little bit of a different format, but not really. Just really concise in the format for you so that we can hit the most important and pressing news from the week every week. So, without further ado, man, let's dive right on into some of the takeaways that we had from this week. And let's talk about what we saw from the Buffalo Bills this past week. And it was nothing but impressive. I mean, this was supposed to be the game of the week. We were looking forward to this, hyping it up. It was Dolphins-Bills, man, and that's usually a good matchup. It was not on Sunday. The Buffalo Bills absolutely put the wood to Mike McDaniel and his squad. And there was some concern, especially early in the season after they lost to the Jets, that the Buffalo Bills might not be the same Buffalo Bills this season, but they went out on Sunday and proved that they are still the Bills. So what were your takeaways from that impressive performance by Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first key takeaway from week 4. After week 1, and Josh Allen had a couple throws, obviously that directly costed them that game with all the turnovers that he had in week 1. And since then, it's really just been dominance. They played some little bit of inferior opponents. They had Vegas in week 2, and then Washington last week. They beat the crap out of both of those teams, and this Miami team, they're coming off of a 70-point outing in week 3, only been done twice in the modern era. So this was, supposed to be the game of the week. And early on in the game, it looked like it was going to be that exactly that, like that Rams Chiefs Monday Night Football game from a few years ago where the total score ends up in the triple digits. Like that's what it felt like. And then the Dolphins weren't scoring as much and the Bills just kept going. And, we saw that in the result. They win 48-20. This is a dominant showing. And there were some whispers, even, from us, from everybody else in the media saying that this is the Dolphins division now. Like this is the AFC East belongs to the Dolphins. And I think we kind of forgot a little too quickly after we watched the Bills kind of self-implode on prime time and on Monday Night Football against Zach Wilson, who's looked so bad through these first 2 weeks. We'll talk about him a little bit later. That we just kind of were like, okay, the Bills aren't as good. They're still going to be good. They'll still beat up on these bad teams, but they don't have a chance in this AFC. I think they're right there with all the other contenders in the AFC. I mean, they just beat Miami by a good margin. Kansas City looks like they might, potentially have some problems here. As well, Cincinnati looks like they might even be out of the race altogether, the way that they're playing right now and with the Joe Burrow situation. But Buffalo, I think I mean, we're going to put out our power rankings probably sometime over the next 24 hours, and I think Buffalo might be the number one team from the AFC in those rankings.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned it with teams like Cincinnati clearly falling out of the power rankings. The Browns had a disappointing week this week. I mean, teams are going to be moving up. I mean, even we'll talk about it later, but even with Philly looking a little bit questionable, Buffalo Bills are moving on up in our power rankings and starting to make a case for one of the best teams, if not the best team in football. I mean, I'm looking at the line from Josh Allen on Sunday. 24 for 25, 320, four tuds, no picks, one touchdown on the ground as well. I mean, he was an absolute dog. I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here. I would, and not like the running game in Buffalo has ever been prominent, and they haven't had needed it to be to win. But this run game is still not there. James Cook is clearly the number one guy. He showed flashes at times, but I mean, even coming in, you didn't expect James Cook to get this kind of workload. He's not a between the tackles bell cow back, and he got 12 carries, 29 yards. He did have a touchdown on Sunday. Do you think this run game plays at all into any concern for the Bills, or do you think they're just going to keep doing what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, the Bills have never had a dominant running
Yeah.
game throughout their entire run here in Buffalo with Josh Allen as the quarterback. They've never had a big focus on particularly the running back position, but the running game is usually fine because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen can boost that running game to the point where, you don't think about it as much as you would with other teams that don't have that element of a running game because Josh Allen can create those runs. Whether that's good for the Buffalo Bills as a whole in the grand scheme of things is a whole different discussion, but the fact that he can add that and almost create his own running game for this team is kind of what makes him the guy that he is. Like, he's not the methodical, can just hit every single throw type of guy like a Joe Burrow was or is supposed to be. But he can do things that not many other human beings on this planet can. Like, he can create his own rushing game for this team. He can make certain throws that no other quarterback in the league can with his arm talent that, is something like we've never seen before. And like Tyler was real big on this, the Bills are cooked this offseason, had them at 16th in our preseason powerings or 15th, somewhere in the teens. And that's not looking great right now because this Bills team is rolling. Josh Allen with Joe Burrow playing the way that he's playing, you start to look around the rest of the league, and even Mahomes has not really looked like himself through the first few weeks of the season. I mean, they put up 40 on Chicago, but so have, a lot of teams are doing a lot of things in Chicago right now, but they've only breached 23 points. They've like their highest score other than that Chicago game was 23 points last night against the Jets. So maybe we could be talking like I talked about it in the Bills episode, man, like between Allen, Burrow, and Mahomes, it kind of depends on what point in the season we are where you decide who the best quarterback in the NFL is. And I don't think it's crazy right now to say that guy could be Josh Allen at this point in time. He's playing like it right now. He played like that on Sunday, 100%. And with Burrow hobbled for the time being, and I think the Chiefs still kind of figuring some things out, the headline says it. There's nothing to worry about in Buffalo for all of those that were concerned after this offseason, after week one. Josh Allen still his dominant self, and the Bills still dominant. I will say one little footnote on that. Tre'Davious White is lost for the season after suffering a torn Achilles. So that's going to be a huge blow because their secondary is, that's their better half of the defense. Between that and the front seven, their secondary is the better part of that. They still have two great safeties back there, but losing Tre'Davious White as your number one corner is a huge blow. Thoughts and prayers go out to him. He's gone through a season-ending knee injury very recently, actually. I believe it was in the last 2 or 3 years. So having to see him go through that again sucks. And the Bills are definitely going to miss him, but I still think that this Bills team can 100%, be a Super Bowl team in this AFC just like they have been for the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. It's just a matter if they stay healthy. I mean, this defense, we talked a lot about the offense. This defense has really impressed. It's going to hurt losing Trey White. But as you mentioned, you still got that elite duo of safeties back there. Jordan Poyer was banged up on Sunday, but they still cleaned up on this Miami offense. So got to love that. And you got Von Miller coming back pretty soon. When is he coming back exactly?
I don't know. It's starting to feel like one of those situations where it's like, oh, he's supposed to be back in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks comes, and then it's 2 more weeks, and I mean, I
Yeah.
get that it was a rough injury, but he is 34 years old. So that needs to be taken into account here. That was one of our drawbacks for the Bills was like, well, everybody's like, oh, we'll wait till Von Miller gets back, and it's like, well, what Von Miller are we going to get once he comes back at this age? But if he looks like he did in the early parts of last season, I'm talking about one of the better edge rushers in the NFL, and if they can add that into this defense that's playing pretty well, they held Miami to 20 points. That's their lowest total on the season to this point. We'll be talking about one of the best defenses and one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. This Buffalo Bills team is rolling right now, and there's no cause for concern there, at least for the time being. So, okay, let's dive into a team that definitely does have some concern, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals, who laid another goose egg, or basically a goose egg, on Sunday. I mean, what was the final score in this one?
27-3. Yeah.
Yeah, 3-27 against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, anybody who's watching football relatively close this season knows that the Titans are not supposed to be a powerhouse. The Bengals are supposed to be a powerhouse, and they went out and got trounced on Sunday, and that's been the theme this year so far for the Bengals. It appears Joe Burrow's still a little bit banged up from that calf. It appears as though Zach Taylor doesn't deserve a head coaching position in the National Football League. I mean, this team is in trouble all over the place, and this is my big takeaway from this week. Said the Bengals are really in trouble, and Zach Taylor might need to start looking for a new job here soon. Some things to note from this game, man. I mean, and in general from the season, they are running out of shotgun 90% of the time. 90% of their play calls on offense are out of the shotgun. Just for reference, the second team on that list, Commanders at 88%, because our offensive line is horrendous. And the Colts come in at 78% at third. 90%, dude. 9 out of 10 plays are in shotgun. That's ridiculous. Obviously, that has something to do with trying to keep Joe Burrow healthy, trying to keep him on his feet, trying to avoid sacks. But, I mean, there's a lot more problems than just that. I mean, Jamar Chase, you saw him complaining in the post-game presser. I'm always effing open. Like, that's not a thing you want to see from your star wide receiver, especially after the game. And, I mean, they do need to get Jamar Chase involved if they're going to win football games. I mean, in their only win this year, last week against the Rams, he had 15 targets, 12 catches. And in the rest of the games this season in which they've lost, he's had either 8 or 9 targets or less. So that's terrible. And then you round it all out with this offense has always been so electric. And when we haven't seen it being absolutely electric, then the defense can somewhat make up for that. But the defense is not there to make up for that this season. I mean, that's not a signature of the Cincinnati Bengals, but they've always been able to help them out. And this season, it ain't happening. They got a 58 overall defensive grade, which is 6th worst in the NFL on PFF. And last season, it was at 75.7, which was the 10th best on PFF. So a complete turnaround in the rankings. So this Cincinnati team has serious troubles, man. What do you think and can turn this ship around, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're now to the point where with Joe Burrow, where it becomes a question of, when do we shut him down and just say,
Yeah.
look, we just gave this guy $250 million, $260 million, the most, expensive contract in NFL history. Do we want to risk him having a long-term problem here just to salvage this season, which looks like it kind of maybe already lost. I mean, the AFC we know is a powerhouse. There's a lot of big teams. We talked about it when we were talking about Buffalo. You got Buffalo, you got Kansas City. In your division, you've got Baltimore, Cleveland. I know Cleveland didn't look great on Sunday, but no Deshaun Watson there. You get him back. That defense is still fantastic. You've still got Miami. The Chargers look like they're trying to turn things around a little bit. So you can't fall to 1-3, 1-4, you can't walk into, I think they have their bye week in week 7 or week 8. They can't walk into that with 2 wins and expect to be in the playoffs and be in the mix. You can't get up to speed that quickly. And we talked about it a few weeks ago when they started slow. They started 0-2, and we were like, okay, 2 years or last year when they started slow, that happens. This is a Cincinnati team that tends to start slow, but the fact that it's still lingering and the fact that Joe Burrow's injury is still lingering, that's a problem. That makes it seem like it's not so much of a short-term problem, and this may be a real issue for this Bengals team. You just look all across the board. Joe Burrow's average depth of target right now is 4.5 yards. This is a team with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on it. T. Higgins operates deep down the field. You can look at his production over the last 4 weeks, with the exception of the Baltimore game. You can see that they're throwing it short. Like, not been good. Jamar Chase, he's pissed because he can work vertically. Like, I understand, like, you want to get him involved in the short game because Joe Burrow can't, drive and throw those balls right now. But I mean, throwing him the ball 15 times is great, and it obviously got you a win on Monday Night Football, but teams are going to start keying in on that, and if they know he can't throw the ball deep to T. Higgins for those 40-yard balls that T. Higgins has made his money off of, their teams are just going to play down, and that's how Cincinnati's getting beat right now. I mean, even the offensive line has looked pretty subpar. Cordell Volson, though, did turn it around after turning in a 0.0 pass blocking grade in week 3, which I've never seen before. He turned in a 37.6 pass blocking grade, but got a 92 run blocking grade.
Steps to the side when they start rushing.
Yeah, like I don't even know how you do. Like, I think it's like a counting thing where, like, you just got to get a certain amount of positive plays, and his negative plays outweighed his positive plays by a significant amount. But you mentioned the defense as well, and I think that's one of the main takeaways is you think about this Cincinnati team over the last 2 or 3 years, and you think about how, this is a fire-powered offense. You've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow, and they can put up all these points in a hurry against some of these teams, but you look at the playoffs and you see all these scores are in the 20s. They're in the teens and 20s. And that's because this defense is coached so well by Lou Anarumo, a guy that, I thought was going to be in head coach conversations. He got to the last stage with the Cardinals. They end up going in a different direction. And the defense has not been the same this year as well. 27 points to the Tennessee Titans is not something that they would be doing in a normal season. That's like 2021 Titans numbers. This Titans team should not be putting 27 on this defense. We've talked about isn't the most talented, but is definitely one of the best coached and is still fairly talented. This isn't like a talentless group on defense. They have a Trey Hendrickson, a DJ Reader. They got some youth in the secondary that they're still trying to work out the kinks. Yeah, they got some nice linebackers as well. So this isn't just a Joe Burrow problem. I think the Bengals are in real trouble as a team. This isn't like when we get Joe Burrow back healthy, we're right back in it. We snap right back into contention. Honestly, even if that happens, it may be too late for this Bengals team. That's kind of the concern right now. And we're starting to talk about, Jake Browning, like what percentage of Joe Burrow, like is 60% of Joe Burrow still better than Jake Browning? Like I get Jake Browning is one of the lower end backups in the NFL, but at a certain point, we got to start protecting this asset in Joe Burrow.
Exactly. I mean, at least Jake Browning can pass it further than, what was the average depth of target? Less than 5?
4.5 yards?
Yeah. So hopefully he can get it farther down the field than Joe Burrow can. But I feel like we're giving a cop-out, a get-out-of-jail-free card for Zach Taylor. I didn't hear you mention him once. And that's a great question, because it's like, how much of this can we put on Joe Burrow not being healthy? And then how much of this can we put on Zach Taylor just with shitty play calling? Because running 90% of your plays out of shotgun is just bad coaching, period.
Yes, but it keeps Joe Burrow from moving. Like, if he's got to turn around and
keeps
whether it be play action and stuff, I get that. I 100% get that. But the fact that Joe Burrow isn't moving, again, we got to protect the asset at certain points of time. Just having him sit back in shotgun, he's only got to take a 2 or 3 step drop and then release the ball. Whereas if he's sitting under center, he's got to take a 7-step drop, or they're running play action and he's taking still a 7-step drop and he's turning his back to the defense. We saw on Monday Night Football, it was a lot easier to watch because that game was in prime time and everybody's eyes were on it. You saw that it was almost 2 to 3 seconds every time. Like, they were trying to keep him up, and the offensive line did play well despite Cordell Volson having such a bad grade. Like, it didn't feel like he got pressured a lot. It was like midway through the third quarter where it felt like the first time that the Rams front really got to him. And that shotgun thing, while it's keeping the offense from progressing and getting to the levels, it's keeping Joe Burrow upright. It's keeping Joe Burrow on the field right now. And at a certain point, that is the priority for Cincinnati right now. I definitely think Zach Taylor deserves some of the blame because you've got to find creative ways to, like I said, get Jamar Chase the ball. Even though T. Higgins isn't really like a yards after catch threat, get him the ball. Just
establish this run game, maybe.
Yeah,
Coaching
that is That as well. I mean, they've been notoriously like, we're going to run the ball and it's going to be inside zone. Like that's what they do. That was their thing all throughout last year, and then they started to adjust a little bit, and that's when you saw that turnaround that we talked about. But haven't seen that yet this year, and I think honestly, like, once a quarter maybe, you've just got to find single coverage for T. Higgins and just throw him the ball there. Just, I don't care if you huck it out of bounds and it's barely even catchable for T. Higgins. You just got to keep the threat there, because it's hard to establish the running game when your average depth of target is 4.5 yards and teams are playing down because he can't throw that ball right now. He cannot beat us over the top, even with these weapons in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that usually can do that. He can't beat us right now, so we're going to play up. We're going to, we can stop the pass and the run by doing this one simple thing. So some of it falls on coaching. I think, not unfortunately, I know some Bengals fans at this time are calling for the head of Zach Taylor, which they've done at multiple points in his tenure here as a head coach. I think that pretty much regardless of what happens this year, even if it is a total disaster, I think the fact that Joe Burrow is injured and, could either A, be playing through injury for the entire season, or B, it's Jake Browning for, from week 6 on or week 8 on, whatever, that's going to keep him his job. Right or wrong, it just kind of is. They're not going to fire him on a year like this.
And the only reason I'm like disappointed is because I know that's true. Like, he's literally going to get another free pass after the season because of what's happening with Joe Burrow right now, which is a joke. Way too many coaches get that, a.k.a. Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley got another free pass on Sunday, but we're not here to talk about that. But there is serious problems in Cincy, and we'll see if they can start to figure it out. I mean, it's really, are you going to shut down Joe Burrow? Are you going to keep him in all season? I mean, that's the big question mark in Cincy right now. So definitely worrisome over there. But next takeaway we want to talk about, and one of your big takeaways from this past week, is CJ Stroud balling out for his Houston Texans, and he might be the guy. He might be the franchise guy in Houston. He might be the answer that they've been looking for in Houston. So that's super exciting. I mean, Stroud was awesome on Sunday. What did you see that made you super excited about the future in Houston, man?
Yeah, I mean, I will just preface this with saying I was not a Stroud guy coming into the draft. Like, I know that there were a lot of people that had, there were some people that had him over Bryce Young. I had him as QB3 behind Anthony Richardson. That's more of a testament to me liking Anthony Richardson a lot than it is like a whole bunch of hate for Stroud. But I never got the thought that he should be going over Bryce Young or even Anthony Richardson for that matter. But clearly, Houston Texans know a little bit more about football than I do, because this dude right now, he's balling out. He just is. And the most impressive part about it for me is what he's doing with the offensive line that they're running out at this current point in time. I mean, you look at this team, and we had, I believe, their offensive line ranked in the middle of the pack with, guys like Laramie Tunsil, Shaq Mason. They had Juice Ruggs coming in as a rookie. They had Kenyon Green coming into his second year, Titus Howard. 4 of the 5 guys that I just mentioned did not play on Sunday. Shaq Mason was the only guy that played on Sunday, and he played pretty bad, grading out at a 50.8 per PFF. They had a first-time tackle start. I can't remember I feel like it was Tegan. No, that's not even him. They did have, Austin Deculus, yeah. He started for the first time in his entire career.
Austin Deculus. Yeah,
come on.
Of course.
He started for the first time in his entire career at left tackle on Sunday. I don't know if anybody that watched the Steelers-Texans game, exclusively, you watched the pregame, you may have seen they listed the offensive linemen that were out. They were missing 6 offensive linemen in that game, and Shaq Mason is a guy that is projected to start. He did end up starting at guard, so that means 4 starters and their 2 best backups were missing in that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers front, which, we widely consider, even with no Cameron Hayward, to be one of the 3 or 4 best defensive fronts. TJ Watt's been, he's got 6 sacks on the year. He didn't have a sack at all on Sunday. I don't think Alex Highsmith did either. And just the out of structure stuff that CJ Stroud's been doing, I didn't see any of that really on tape. And when I did, my mistake, I kind of just dismissed it as, okay, well, he's got this Ohio State offensive line. He may not be walking into that in the NFL. And once that's gone, also the weapons thing, we talked about it this offseason. Houston's weapons are really rough. You look at Nico Collins, Tank really Dell, Dameon Pierce, Dalton Schultz. You don't think, wow, we could be talking about a group that has a lot of offense production. Man, these guys are balling as well. not only do I want to talk about CJ Stroud, I just want to talk about the Texans as a whole, honestly. Nico Collins has been one of the more productive wide receivers in the league so far this year. Tank Dell, also, small guy, was like one of the most talked about wide receivers, maybe not one of the highest ranked, but because of how he is like that kind of Calvin Austin thing, like that when he came out 2 years ago, where it's like he is a perfect athlete outside of the fact that he's 5'8". And we see him and Calvin Austin as well in Pittsburgh in this game, are making impacts on their team even at that small size. So got to give credit to those guys as well. Dameon Pierce had a good day on the ground for the first time this season, really. But man, CJ Stroud, I mean, like we talked about it, or everybody is talking about it with the records that he's breaking. He was, I believe, had the third most passing yards in his first 3 games with 906, and then he had 1,200 and change, which is only behind Cam Newton for his first 4 games. So wow. He's balling out, and like this isn't like he's walking into San Francisco where he can just deal to these playmakers and sit behind this good offensive line. Like he's doing this. Like he's doing this by himself, and what Anthony Richardson's doing in Indianapolis is great. I think Bryce Young off to a bit of a slow start in Carolina, but I think CJ Stroud, maybe you throw Bijan Robinson in there as well, and I think those are the 2 front runners for Offensive Rookie of the Year right now. And I think Houston, just 2 years after getting rid of Deshaun Watson, has found their answer at quarterback.
Yeah, and that's awesome for Texans fans, obviously. And not only do you have a guy that's playing out of his shoes right now, but you also have a leader going forward into the future. I mean, you saw the post-game press conference from C.J. Stroud, but if you didn't, he was talking about how, like, we want Texans fans to be proud. Like, we want them to wear their gear outside and, like, actually be happy to do it. And, like, you don't hear that a lot especially from a young quarterback.
Yeah, and in Houston, I mean, they haven't had much reason to do that in the last 2 or 3 years. No. You had Deshaun Watson sitting out for an entire season, and then he gets traded to Cleveland, and then it's more misery with Davis Mills and that whole thing. And they were criticized pretty heavily when they had the number 2 pick, they had the number 12 pick. They take CJ Stroud at 2, and they come up to get Will Anderson. They give up next year's first, and all offseason we talked about, well, Arizona could have 1 and 2 because the Cardinals and Texans could very well be the 2 worst teams in the NFL right now. Texans are sitting at 2 and 2. The Cardinals look feisty, so Cardinals conversation is a different thing, but more so talking about the culture, because they said that was a culture establishing move. Like we're not pushing all of our chips in on this year, but we want to show the fans, we want to show the NFL, we want to show the guys inside this building that we're committed to winning right now. And we can get a Will Anderson in here in addition to a CJ Stroud, 2 of the 3 best players in this class draft-wise. And Will Anderson had a great day as well. And I just think, you talked about it with Stroud. He seems like a culture shifter. Will Anderson seems like a culture shifter. D'Amico Ryans coached a great game defensively. Yeah. Bobby PFF Bobby. Bobby Slovitz coming over, bringing in that Shanahan system. He coached a great game, and he's leading CJ Stroud here. Like, this is the thing that you'd want him to be in. This is the system that you'd want him to be in, where he just looks for read one and he can deliver it to it. Like, I don't know, man. I didn't like him coming out. I had my doubts, but he's putting on right now, and you got to be pretty excited if you're a Texans fan moving forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's always a good thing when you get your franchise quarterback in town. I don't know if we have ours yet. You don't know if you have yours yet.
No.
So happy to see another franchise finally get their franchise guy. I guess
enjoy something we can't.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So another thing we want to talk about, one of my big takeaways from this past week, is that the Eagles, despite the dub on Sunday against the Washington Commanders, this is not the same Eagles team that we saw last year. They have yet to hit their stride in 2023. And, let's just talk about it, man. They are undefeated. And obviously it's a weird argument to say that this team isn't the same team as last year, especially when they're undefeated in their first 4 games. But, I was watching it with an Eagles fan on Sunday, and this is just the same optimism, the same dominance that you were getting from Philly last year. You just aren't seeing it this year, and it's for a multitude of reasons. One of the big reasons is the injuries are really starting to stack up for this Philly squad, especially in the secondary. People who watched the game on Sunday, James Bradberry was playing safety for the majority of this game. And anybody who's been watching football over the past 3 or 4 years knows that James Bradberry is an all-pro cornerback, not a safety. So they are in dire straits going on in Philly, putting him out to the safety position. They had no Sidney Brown, no Justin Evans, both safeties. Corner Avonte Maddox is out for the season. So that sucks. So you already see the secondary starting to stack up with injuries. And you've got the big name guys. You've got Darius Slay. You've got James Bradbury. But beyond that, if you really start to lose your depth and you have to put James Bradbury at safety, you've got serious problems in Philly, especially on the defensive side for a team that prides themselves on defense. And this defense has not been the same as it was last season. I mean, the front seven is awesome. I mean, it's just the front line is awesome. There's no denying that. And it's going to be awesome for years to come. But this defense as a whole, as I was just talking about, so they had a 61.8 defensive grade against Washington. That averages out to 69.2 for the season. Last year, they had an 85.8 average grade over the entire season. So that's almost 20 slots on PFF, which is absolutely insane. They're allowing the 6th most passing yards in the league so far. So this defense is really struggling, and that's the main concern for me. I also think that Jalen Hurts doesn't look as good this year. This offense kind of seems like it's missing Shane Steichen a little bit. So I think there is some cause for concern in Philly despite the 4-0 record. But do you have anything to play it back against that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll push back a little bit because while I agree, like, this isn't the same Eagles team as last year. Last year's Eagles team was the best team from start to finish. Throughout the course of last year, they made it to the Super Bowl. They're a couple plays away from winning the Super Bowl. It's kind of hard to compare those teams, especially when you're looking at the record right now and it is 4-0.
Why is it hard to compare those teams? They only got better on paper. What did they lose?
Javon Hargrave. They add in Jalen Carter, and I know that he's doing pretty well. They lose Miles Sanders. They get DeAndre Swift in here as well. Look,
who's been playing better?
I'm not saying. Well, okay, then what's the issue then?
No, I'm just saying. You're saying that they got this. You can't look at this as the same team from last year.
Well,
they only got better, and they're getting worse.
I'm saying that being worse than last year's Eagles team, not necessarily a bad thing. Because we're gonna put out our power ranking. Like I said earlier, we're gonna put out our power ranking sometime in the next 24 hours. Eagles are probably gonna be in the top 3, and that's just like they're 4-0. They've won some close games. They've also dominated some teams. They dominated the Bucks. But they win a close-ish game against Minnesota. They win a very close game here in Week 4. They get out to an early lead against New England, and then they kind of let them back in it. Jalen Hurts, I'll give you a little bit on that of just like, okay, maybe he doesn't look like he did last year, but kind of the same effect. Jalen Hurts, in my opinion, was the best quarterback in the NFL last year. He played like it from week 1 until he got hurt, and if he finishes those last 2 games, unless something, absolutely terrible happens, he wins most valuable player over Patrick Mahomes. It was just a matter of he got hurt. But he was the best quarterback in the NFL last season, and he's still playing like one of the, 5, 6, 7 best quarterbacks in the NFL this season. We had an A.J. Brown sighting for the first time in a few weeks, like a real, true A.J. Brown sighting. This week, he got in the end zone once or twice. Had a couple big plays in there as well. So you love to see that. But it's kind of hard to like criticize this team because you're trying to compare them to one of the best teams. Like last year's Eagles team was one of the best teams that we've seen probably in the last 6 or 7 years. From start to finish in the regular season. They started out 11-0, and it wasn't like a Steelers 2020 11-0. Like it was like they're beating the crap out of teams, 7 to 8 of those weeks, and they're still a really good team. Like I'm not worried about the Eagles. You look in this conference, you see San Francisco, you see Dallas right now. I still think they've got just as good a shot as anybody in the NFL to go to the Super Bowl. I know it's still early.
Which was not the case last season. Which was not the case. Like, you weren't saying that statement about the Eagles last year. Like, they have just as good of a shot as anybody. This was like, no, it's the Eagles and everybody else. It's the Eagles, Chiefs, and then you got the rest of your teams who have an even shot. Like, this is a completely different conversation we're having about a team that went to the Super Bowl last year.
I get it. But, okay, so the thing is, the headline is the 2023 Eagles haven't caught their stride yet. And while I think that's true, if this is the team that hasn't caught their stride yet, I'm really afraid to see what they look like when they catch their stride. I'm really afraid to see that. Because if they catch their stride, we could be talking about another 11-0 start. Like, they're 4-0. They've beaten Not the greatest of competition. I'll give you that. Um,
In
but
close games, dude. Like, I mean, if you're watching the game on Sunday, like we're one Terry McLaurin foot inbounds over a forearm away from driving down the field and winning the game in overtime.
well,
Like, I mean, and then what's the conversation we're having today?
we're
Like,
having a slightly different conversation, but it's probably much more like, oh, Washington's for real, yada yada, than it is like Philly is
didn't
a
didn't need
disaster.
that tone on that. Didn't need that tone on that, just to
I mean,
say. But
but
okay.
you look at these next few weeks for them. You go to LA, even though the Rams have their fans, I think Philly still might make that 30-70 split in the crowd. Then they go to MetLife to play the Jets. Then they do have Miami, and then it's the Commanders again. Then you play Dallas in Week 9, and then you get a bye, and then you get Kansas City, Buffalo. You got a rough. God, oh my God, they get Dallas bye week, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas,
Oh my
Seattle.
God.
So they better start hot, and we
Yeah.
might be having a different conversation in the middle of those weeks there. But I'm not worried about the Eagles. If that's like, that's the all-encompassing take here. Is I'm not worried about Philadelphia one bit. I think they could be 6-7-0, and we're talking about them in the same way we're talking about all these other contenders.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll give it to you. I mean, I think if injuries really start to stack up, though, continue to stack up,
Now that's
that's a
one
problem.
thing because last year Philly was pretty far ahead
Healthy.
as the healthiest team in the NFL. They didn't really
Yeah.
suffer any injuries outside of Jalen Hurts missing those last few weeks, but by then they had, more or less locked up the 1 seed. And even when you put Gardner Minshew in there, they still went out and scored like 35 points against Dallas, who was one of the best teams in the NFL last year as well. It's just the whole roster is so well equipped to deal with injuries. We talked about that front group of guys, that pass rush where it runs 8 or 9 deep. Like they could just rotate these guys in and out. And that is part of why they stay so healthy is because they're not playing guys 100% of the snaps on defense. They can rotate these guys in and out. Now, when you start losing guys on the back end, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult for you. It's kind of a Darius Slay, James Bradbury centered secondary. And if those guys are out, you're a little bit more concerned
Or
specifically
if
about
one
this
of them's
defense.
playing safety,
Or if one of them's playing safety. But
which is happening right now, by the way.
Also, you lose one of these playmakers, and again, this is a little unfair to be like, oh, well, what if this team loses their best wide receiver? Then what happens? You do that with anybody. But this offense can, if the running game isn't working on a day and they're missing one of these wide receivers, which they might get some regression to the mean happening with their injuries, that's when you start getting worried. But as of right now, man, it's kind of hard to pinpoint something and be like, okay, this is what's wrong with Philadelphia because there's not a whole lot to point at.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I'll give it to you. We'll see how it continues to unfold over the next few weeks as we went over their schedule. They're gonna have to put their game faces on coming up here, but definitely interesting times in Philly. Next one we want to talk about, and one of your next big takeaways from this past week is Mr. Desmond Ridder. Looking really rough in Atlanta right now, man. We're not sure if he's going to be able to maintain that starting job or maintain a starting job anywhere in the foreseeable future in the National Football League. So your big takeaway is it might be time for Desmond Ridder to take a seat on the pine, on the bench, on the sideline. So why do you feel like this is the case?
Well, if you watch the game Sunday morning, I don't care if you watched it on ESPN or if you watched the Toy Story broadcast, you can see
It was
Ritter
more
struggling
clear
out
on the
there.
Toy Story broadcast.
It
that he
honestly was. It honestly was. Like I know that there were some people that didn't have ESPN Plus, but they've got Disney Plus because they've got kids, whatever, and they watched that whole game on the Toy Story broadcast, and they probably saw the same things that I saw. Maybe even have a more harsh take towards Desmond Ridder after watching that in live action. And I have no idea how they did that. Credit to Disney and their whole production crew for being able to do that. That's awesome. But back to the matter at hand, and this was a very winnable game for Atlanta. Like they could have very well won this game. Jacksonville's offense, I still am unsure about. It still looks shaky to me. It has really all season. And it looked shaky again on Sunday, even though, that was practically a home game for them out in London, and they only scored 23 points. 7 of that comes as a direct result of Desmond Ridder throwing a pick six. This offense is ready to go outside of Desmond Ridder. Bijan Robinson, I said it in the offseason, and he looks like the best running back in the NFL. I know Christian McCaffrey's doing his thing in San Francisco and definitely puts together an argument. I think it's 1 and 2, whichever way you want to order it. But Bijan Robinson is playing fantastic. He had a crazy, Desmond Ridder somehow missed through him on a ball 3 yards away, and Bijan Robinson just went up and snatched it like it was a tennis ball, and ended up turning that sack into a first down somehow. Drake London had a touchdown. Kyle Pitts still nowhere to be found. And came out today. Arthur Smith said Desmond Ridder is going to be our starting quarterback in week 5. I don't know if he said it in week 5 and beyond, but he may have said going forward. The coach verbiage is a little confusing, but it looks like Desmond Ridder's the quarterback for at least this week. And I honestly think that's a mistake, man. I don't think Taylor Heineke is a world beater. I think he's somewhere in the 30s in quarterback rankings, but so is Desmond Ridder. And right now, Desmond Ridder isn't working. We talked about it a little bit where everybody's talking about Kirk Cousins of the Jets, and maybe it could be Kirk Cousins here to Atlanta. Not that they're running the crap out of Desmond Ridder, but I just feel like the offense would have to change a little bit. The thing that makes the most sense to me is Ryan Tannehill. I know that they just won on Sunday, so they're 2-2. It's not like they're 0-4 and they're out of it and looking to move on, but let's say somehow Malik Willis / Will Levis comes and takes that job from Ryan Tannehill before the trade deadline. I think that makes way too much sense. Arthur Smith, familiar play caller for him, coming from Tennessee as the offensive coordinator. They need a quarterback change here in Atlanta, and I see what Tampa Bay's doing. I see what New Orleans is doing. I think that if you put Ryan Tannehill here, this is the far and away favorite in the NFC South, in my opinion. This
Why
is
not Malik Willis? We talked about Malik Willis at one time.
Yeah, but I think Tennessee wouldn't trade away Malik Willis to keep Tannehill as the starter.
They've been actively shopping him before the season.
I think they maybe had a little bit more confidence in Tannehill. I haven't heard anything of them saying that they're going to shop Willis since the season started. Yeah. Maybe there is rumblings. I just don't see any reason for them to do that. I get it, but I don't see any reason for them to do that right now, because I do think that what they've got right now, not to turn this into a Tennessee thing, I think they just want to see who wins that second spot between Willis and Levis, and if they are like, all right, the season's over, Tannehill, you're either getting traded out of here, we're just going to sit you down for the rest of the year, see what we got in these young guys. Hell, they might honestly alternate games of just like, all right, we're going to start Malik Willis this week, we're going to start Will Levis this week, whoever plays the best gets to play next week, and do that for the rest of the year. I don't know. But I just think that whether it be Taylor Heineke, whether it be Kirk Cousins, whether it be Ryan Tannehill, I don't care who it is, it can't be Desmond Ridder for the rest of the season. This is a team that, this isn't one of the worst teams in the league. Take the quarterback off the field and play with 10 guys. This is still a team that's not going to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. They can still win football games. This defense has been playing a lot better than it did in seasons past. The running game is obviously fantastic. They can win games. They're not going to be in this Caleb Williams, Drake May, whatever quarterback you want to talk about at the top of the draft. They're going to have to find ways to get a veteran or figure this shit out with Desmond Ridder, and I just don't think that they can. I don't think that Desmond Ridder's got it to be a starting quarterback in this league long term. I mean, you see he's even losing the locker room a little bit. He tried to dap up Matt Collins after what I was imagining is a Desmond Ridder pick, and Matt Collins, I literally stood up like he wanted to hit him. It wasn't like a brush off, like a man, get out. It was like okay,
I want the smoke.
We're going right now, you and me, just for a dap.
And then Desmond immediately right. Disconnects and starts walking the other way. I was like, oh my god. First of all, why does Matt Collins think that he deserves targets over, say, Kyle Pitts, who maybe should be screaming in Ridder's face instead? But that's either here nor there. But go ahead.
Everybody needs to be screaming in Arthur Smith's face, because this very clearly isn't working. We trade for Gardner Minshew. See what you can do to get him in the building. I don't know if Indianapolis would be willing to move him, especially with Anthony Richardson maybe struggling with some concussions, and having a good backup is very valuable in this league. But if you give up a certain level of draft pick to go get Gardner Minshew, I'm sure they'll
Jacoby Brissett.
Somebody, anybody. Jacoby Brissett, somebody. You got to make a change at some point. I mean, like I said, he's kind of losing the locker room a little bit, and I think that at a certain point, Arthur Smith's going to lose the locker room, similar to the way that we were talking about earlier this week with Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson, where it's like if you keep running this guy out there and the defense is playing well, the running game's well, and he just keeps losing football games. He had 3 turnovers in this game. He had a pick six that cost them 7 points. He had a fumble at the end of the game that ended the game for this team. You're gonna lose guys. You're gonna start to lose the buy-in, and once you lose the buy-in, especially on a team like this, where if they are feisty and they are inspired and going out there and hitting hard and running hard, they could win this division and be a playoff team. If you lose that, that goes away.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's really not. I think you covered just about all of it there. I mean, Desmond Ridder does not deserve a starting quarterback job in the NFL right now. I mean, it's pretty clear to anybody who's been watching, and as you said, the whole team around him is built to be successful. And one thing that we didn't talk about a lot, but this offensive line is one of the better groups in the league, correct?
Yeah, I mean, hasn't been as good as it was
No,
during last season, but
no,
it's still been very good. And it's not like, we talked about it with Houston. I mean, you look at the situation that CJ Stroud's dealing with and how, the weapons around him weren't supposed to be good, and the offensive line really isn't good. He's not in that situation here.
And we talk about quarterbacks who make players better around them,
yes.
and we're already putting Stroud into that conversation.
Yeah, you don't have to do a whole lot. Just honestly, on this Atlanta team, with Bijan, with Tyler Algier, with some solid weapons, with a good offensive line and a good defense, just don't turn the ball over. That's all you have to do. I mean, at a certain point, once we get into the late season, into the playoffs, you got to start making plays as a quarterback. But right now, you just don't turn the ball over. If they don't turn the ball, they're in a 50-50 chance in this game. And just the turnovers 3 times, one that directly resulted in 7 points, and then I think he threw a pick on the very next drive. You're not going to win that way.
No, you can't win that way. And it's frustrating because, like you said, this is a team that should be winning right now, and they're not. They've got the talent to do it, except for the quarterback position. And I mean, you talked about it. The one explanation for Desmond Ridder staying in as starting quarterback is his rushing ability and what it can create. But he's not rushing the ball. I mean, outside of week 2 when he scored that game-winning touchdown, rushes it in. He had 5 attempts, 40 yards. Not that impressive in that game, first of all. And then outside of that, he has yet to break 7 yards on the ground in any other game. So he's not even providing that. I mean, that was he ran the fastest 40 of any quarterback in recently.
That draft, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what the hype was for Desmond Ridder. And it was oh, well, if he's going to be a good fit anywhere, it's going to be Atlanta because he can at least run the ball. But when he's not running the ball, he's literally a paperweight.
Even to the, just real quickly to cover that last effect on losing the locker room, this is the exact same thing they went through last year because Marcus Mariota was looking the same way that Desmond Ridder is right now. And I can, for the guys that have been there for the last 2 years, I mean, God's sakes, can't imagine how Kyle Pitts feels where he's looking around and he's he saw the last bit of Matt Ryan where he's running for his life the entire time and one of the worst red zone quarterbacks ever. And obviously Kyle Pitts could be one of the best red zone targets ever. He gets Marcus Mariota, he gets Desmond Ridder at the end of the year, and then he gets Desmond Ridder again this year. At some point, fans, the front office, the players, they got to be getting tired of this poor quarterback play shit.
When you mention the fans first, it is not a good
Yeah, do this for the fans, man.
Yeah, Jesus. Do this they deserve better in Atlanta.
They do.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's a tough scene in Atlanta right now, and it seems like Desmond Ridder should be taking a seat. He's not going to be doing it this week, but it should be coming pretty soon because I miss Heineke time. I miss Heineke.
And the thing is, I think he could have a terrible game if he starts next week and he has a terrible game. If he makes 2 good throws, we're all going to be over the moon because we're oh my God, it's Heineke time. He's so back. He's so much better than Ridder. It'll get stale after a few weeks, but just give a punch to this team of some kind.
He's going to have that pylon diving touchdown in the first week that he starts, and that'll be the only highlight. And everything else, he'll throw for 50 yards with 3 picks, but that'll be the highlight.
And
it's Heineke time.
That thing that we talked about with him in Washington, where it's just He knows I cannot make this play by myself, but Terry McLaurin can. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, those are guys where you just like kind of blindly throw them the ball and just be like, they have a better chance of converting this in first down or, getting 4 or 5 yards here than I do, doing anything like quarterback wise, running wise, whatever. Like,
and I guess as a young quarterback, he's afraid of making those mistakes because it will reflect badly upon him going forward in the future. But like Heineke, he doesn't give a shit at this point. Like, I mean, like you said, he's just
and everything
is
house money for him.
Talented players, right? Exactly. So like, it doesn't matter. Just give Heineke a chance. I want to see it. But all right. Let's dive into my last takeaway from this week, and it's a guy, we mentioned him in the Desmond Ridder conversation. It's a guy that we were talking very similarly about last week in the same light that we were talking about Desmond Ridder this week, and that is Zach Wilson, man. And my takeaway for Zach Wilson headed forward into the rest of the season is that he might be able to keep this team afloat at least until possibly Aaron Rodgers comes back this season. I mean, that seems like it's more and more every day going to be a possibility, but that's nonetheless. But Zach Wilson does look like a serviceable quarterback, and he looked pretty damn serviceable last night. Finished with I'm a big PFF guy today, but 72.2 passing grade on Sunday Night Football last night against the Chiefs, and that's the second best grade of his entire career so far. So maybe Zach Wilson's turning it around, and I mean, to the eye test, he looked phenomenal. He looked confident last night. He was making some back shoulder throws that were impressive. Now, he did have the fumbled snap that pretty much ended the game, but that's a freak thing. Like that's not – it would be much worse if he threw like an interception to end the game. Like that's a lot worse. But like a fumbled snap – that's just a freak accident. And right after the game, he took full responsibility. He was like, this is my fault. I'm the reason we lost the game. But it was awesome to see how all the support on Twitter, especially, people felt bad for him. People felt like sorry for Zach Wilson. And maybe he doesn't want that. But you saw the support of his teammates, which was awesome to see because it was a question mark. I mean, we saw the reports that Robert Saleh was losing this locker room because of his decision to continue forward with Zach Wilson. And obviously that's not the case as of last night because you saw a ton of teammates coming up and supporting Zach Wilson for his mistake. So that was awesome to see. And I really do think that Zach Wilson can keep this team afloat. I mean, this defense is going to do its thing. I mean, it's on paper, it's one of the best, if not the best defense in the National Football League. So they're going to do their thing as long as they do enough. And this offense around Zach Wilson is awesome. I mean, people tend to forget, but Garrett Wilson still won Offensive Rookie of the Year with Zach Wilson under the helm last year, or at the helm. And I know Mike White was there for a little bit of it, but Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson did have a connection last year. And something that you see from Zach Wilson that you can't get from anybody, or you can't get from Aaron Rodgers at least, and that I saw last night, was his ability to create more. Like, he can roll out of the pocket, and I know.
His ability to run in a straight line is better than Aaron Rodgers. That's
okay. Now,
it.
His ability to avoid the pocket, like get out and roll out to the side, like he can't. Aaron Rodgers cannot do that.
I get it, but it's the death of him. Like I like Zach Wilson to a certain degree, but partially that is the death of him. Is him immediately bailing out of the pocket, and doesn't help that this offensive line is not played very well at all to start this season. I mean, hell, Aaron Rodgers played 4 snaps. He got pressured on 2 of them. Yeah. And Zach Wilson is a very paranoid quarterback. Like, that is one thing that, he can create, but he is paranoid as hell. And at a certain point,
didn't see any of that last night.
And you didn't. And that's kind of the thing. And that's why this is the headline right now, is we're saying that he might be able to keep the ship afloat, despite the fact that through, 2 games and 3 quarters to this point, it was sit him down for Chris Streveler or Trevor Siemian or anything else other than this. Last night looked good. And I don't want to take too much stock in that because there were some very weird things going on, like the fact that, you talked about PFF. Zach Wilson outgraded Patrick Mahomes by 20 points. Patrick Mahomes graded out at a 52.2. And I believe I saw today, and I'm not sure if it was throughout his entire career or just his NFL career, but I'm pretty sure it said since high school, that was the first time that a quarterback on an opposing team of Patrick Mahomes had more completions, more yards, more touchdowns, and less picks than Patrick Mahomes since he was in high school. and it was Zach Wilson. It wasn't Josh Allen. It wasn't Joe Burrow. It wasn't Tom Brady. It wasn't Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. It was Zach Wilson. Like,
exactly.
the guy who, to this point, has been awful.
To his clutch factor, bro. A little bit, because it's like,
oh boy,
dude. I know. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little off the rails here, but like, I think that Zach Wilson looked more, and this is not an overstretch at all. He looked more comfortable than any other point in his career.
Oh,
last night.
Yeah, like he just even looking at this season, he looked way more comfortable. And that's another thing. Like, you talked about Garrett Wilson, man. Like, tonight or last night, it felt together. Like, it didn't feel like those two were like Garrett Wilson's like, you got to give me the ball. And Zach's like, look, I can't. It just felt like they were on it, and maybe that's what like they need to do.
It's that Tim Robinson sketch where he's like, I can't drive. I don't know how.
Like that, and that's how it felt for the first 3 weeks. I mean, we saw that like whole meme of like, oh, they just come together and Garrett Wilson yells at him and then Zach Wilson throws a touchdown to him. That happened like in each of the first 3 weeks. They threw the ball to him 14 times last night, and that worked. Like,
yep.
Boom. That worked, and it opened up the run game a little bit. The running game in weeks 2 and 3 was atrocious. Breece Hall couldn't get anything going. Dalvin Cook couldn't get anything going. I think they only ran the ball like 8 or 9 times against Dallas. I understand that they were at a deficit for the majority of that game, but you got to establish the run to a certain degree. They didn't do that. They were able to do that a little bit last night. Breece Hall had a big run. Kind of felt a little bit like, not a J.K. Dobbins type thing, but he did get caught, and that's, Breece Hall doesn't get caught on that. We saw that in the early parts of last year. Breece Hall shouldn't be getting caught. But, look, I'm not going to say that this team's going to just snap of a finger, turn this thing around. I know that this sounds stupid. I think Aaron Rodgers being there, in the stadium, in the press box, kind of gave Zach Wilson a little bit of confidence, and I'm almost certain that's why Aaron Rodgers was there. Was because he like Zach Wilson is a kid, like he's older than you and me, but like when you
barely
as a football player, like he has, this sounds going to sound rude, but he has the mind of a child. Like he needs constant reinforcement of like
all quarterbacks
you're good,
all
and but Zach Wilson to a much more serious degree, especially when they've had to deal with the amount of criticism that Zach Wilson has over the last 3 years. Aaron Rodgers was brought in to be his replacement because of how bad the quarterback situation has been recently. And for him to be thrust into this, I can't imagine he, all guys stay ready, but he didn't think he was going to be the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season, stepping into the shoes of one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks ever 4 snaps into the season. And I think it's going to take him a little time to adjust, and we maybe saw the culmination of it last night. I don't think that this is going to be like all right, well, Zach Wilson's going to become the number 2 pick that he was supposed to be, but we may have seen the Jets season turn around last night. Like, they lose. We'll have this quick conversation. The calls that were made at the end of that game, I'm not the NFL is rigged person. I think that's,
now I am.
Conspiracy theory thing. The fact that the flag got thrown after the ball was picked makes me a little curious, and the fact that the Chiefs
question why I'm analyzing this league if the whole thing is scripted anyway.
The NFL has been really cracking down on Chiefs offensive linemen to start this season, and then there's a very obvious defensive lineman going, hey, I'm getting held here.
Holding this guy. Bro.
On a 3rd and 23, 4th and 23 Patrick Mahomes run. Taylor Swift is in the building. That whole thing is going on. ESPN, SportsCenter, Bleacher Report, NFL will not shut up about it. It's getting a little old at this point. It's almost getting old to say that it's getting old. That's how old it's getting with this whole Taylor Swift thing. But immediately the very next day, after some very questionable calls, that the Chiefs win, we see Taylor Swift is the header for for the NFL's Twitter page, and in the Instagram bio for the NFL, the Chiefs are 2-0 as Swifties.
Definitely should have been one of our headlines this week. This was the big takeaway this morning. I mean, once everybody saw that,
and I'm a Steelers fan, I could give a shit about either one of these teams. One of the teams that I've been pulling for is the Jets. I love Garrett Wilson. I love Aaron Rodgers. I like Zach Wilson coming out. I like Salah a lot. Maybe it's the Hard Knocks thing. I don't know. But I'm a little bit drawn to this team. I was pissed last night watching that game.
Me too.
Because I think, I think they got screwed. And you talked about it a little bit with Zach Wilson turning the ball over. Not very many times do you fumble the ball with 7 minutes and 40 seconds left at the 50-yard line and expect to
And
not
don't
get the
get a
ball
chance.
back.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
ridiculous.
doesn't happen very often.
Mm-mm.
Not the I mean, like for God's sakes, when Patrick Mahomes had that 23-yard run, that was from the 50. Like they got 20 yards on that one play. So
Yeah.
even like it wasn't like a clock management problem or anything. It's just very rarely would you be like, okay, we've turned the ball over with 7 minutes and 24 seconds left. That's it. We're done. Just
There was
phone it in.
something, all that I will say is that there was something really weird about the second half of yesterday's game. There
It
was
was.
that.
I mean, but you got to remember, like it was 17-0 for Kansas City at one point, and the Jets just started to build a little bit of momentum. Zach Wilson, turned it up a little bit. Patrick Mahomes turned the ball over twice. Like I saw somebody like tweet like I was a reporter or something. And he was like, I've gotten 3 texts saying like, is Mahomes sick? Because like there were just like some throws where it was just like he had like a 30-yard ball and it just like was like 6 or 7 yards short. It's like that guy doesn't do that.
Tell me why after his first interception he points up out of the booth and does the Taylor Swift heart.
I think I missed that. I might have missed that.
That was, I was like, what is going on? It
See,
might
now,
not have been his first pick. It was some bad play that happened, and then he was like that. I was like, oh my God,
I was
this guy.
a little weird. I've never been like how people like hate the Patriots and hate the Cowboys. I just hate the Ravens. Like that's pretty much it. But like people like to hate the best, and I get that a lot of people hate Mahomes for that reason. And I've never really seen that, but last night when he like slid and didn't score the touchdown and everybody was like, oh my God, he's so selfless. And then he stands up and is like, are you not entertained?
Yeah, does
I
that
was like,
fucking,
okay,
yeah.
man, do you not realize like the context of what just happened and why you're here right now? Maybe you should just kind of walk back to the huddle and maybe keep it down a little bit.
Simmer down. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not here to put the NFL into question. Again, I've never been like that guy where it's like, oh, it's all rigged for ratings, yada, yada, yada. But there were definitely some very strange things going on in last night's game. And Robert Saleh 100% has every right to be pissed.
Exactly.
If I was him in that press conference last night and then probably again today or tomorrow, I'd be flipping podiums, cussing out reporters, all kinds of stuff about what happened, and I'd eat the fine. I'm sure Woody Johnson would be willing to pay that fine for him. So
yeah,
and he's going to, because he definitely is going to receive a fine after what he said to the refs last night.
Whatever, man, it's fine. But anyway, great game for Zach Wilson last night, despite the refs' vendetta against the Jets. This was a great game from Zach Wilson. You can't pin that. I mean, it was a mistake, sure, at the end of the game, fumbling the snap, but it shouldn't have cost him a game, like you said. And that's a freak thing that happens. Like, that's not a skill-based thing. Like, that's just like, damn, that really sucks that happens.
Like, that happens like once a season for everybody. And they happen to lose the fumble, and it happened to be the last possession of the game.
Josh Allen did it on his goal line, and to end up with a safety.
Josh Allen did it in week 1 against the Jets, and that ultimately cost them that game. The Jets have a free win because Josh Allen fumbled a snap.
Facts, dude. I didn't even think about that. So, like, it comes full circle for Zach Wilson. I loved what I saw from him last night. Really, it's just a feel-good story, him coming back like this. And I do think that there is a little bit to, because, most people I saw yesterday, most people are in a boot, completely stationary, can't get up, go anywhere for at least 12 weeks after an Achilles tear. Aaron Rodgers was speed walking in crutches on the sideline yesterday. Yeah. Speed walking.
I think that the idea
he had a revolutionary surgery. He got a replacement Achilles in there. So, like, it's a new type of procedure, not the same type of Achilles surgery that everybody else has gotten. So I think there is a little bit, this is definitely tinfoil hat-ish, but I think there is a little bit to the fact, I mean, you mentioned it, that Aaron Rodgers was at the game last night, and that gave Zach Wilson a little bit more confidence. I think Zach Wilson seeing Aaron Rodgers walk around like that, he's like, dude, this guy really is trying to come back for the playoffs. Like, he really wants to be back for this team this season, and that's Aaron Rodgers' goal this year. And I think that the team is really starting to believe that, and I think that that's a mental security for Zach Wilson that, like, hey, if I can just keep this team afloat until our guy comes back, then that's what I need to do. That's what I can do for this team. And I think Aaron Rodgers showing up, walking around on the sidelines last night, like you said, completely changed the narrative for this Jets team and gave them a sense of confidence that they didn't have before. So I think that Zach Wilson, to bring this completely full circle, can keep this team afloat until a possible Aaron Rodgers return late this season. So that'll be fun to watch. But yeah, man, that just about does it for our takeaways from week 4. Coming out with another episode later this week, previewing week 5 ahead of us. It'll be another great week of football. Looking forward to that. And apologies for not getting any podcasts out last week. I'm just a bum, straight up, but it'll change this week. Looking forward to the football content. So we'll catch you guys later this week. Peace.